So, good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you for joining us today for this exclusive roundtable, which is organized by ETHR World in association with Simply Learn on importance of upskilling in this time of pandemic for employee success and business progress. The unfolding of COVID pandemic has introduced some major shifts in the way industries have worked so far. As we go through these times of uncertainty, one thing that we are certain about is that this shift calls for some major changes. To meet up with these challenges, this new normal throws at us. Today's discussion is all about upskilling the current employees to deliver the best they can during unprecedented times. To further enlighten us about today's discussion, we have with us Kavita Kwaru, who is the Global Head for Talent and Organizational Transformation at UST Global. Dr. Swati Sarangi, who is the Global Head Learning, Leadership and Organization Development at Dr. Reddy's. Vidya Thakur, who is the Head Learning and Development at L&T Infotech. Raman Kumar Singh, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at ABB India Limited. Thirumala Arohi, who is the Vice President and Head Education, Training and Assessments at Infosys. And we have Amit Sharma, who is the CHRO Volvo Group. And we have Krishna Kumar, who is the CEO Simply Learn, who will be anchoring the conversation. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Now I hand over to Krishna to take the conversation ahead.
Thank you, Tarana, and thank you everyone for joining. I think these days the number of such webinars, virtual conferences have increased a lot, right? Compared to what we used to do during pre-pandemic time. I think we are spending more time doing such event, also participating in such event. But I think that's it. That's the life. So I'll start with, I'll try to make it conversational. And if there are questions that you are not comfortable, you can decide not to answer. And please share data that you are comfortable sharing, something that is very specific to your org. You definitely don't want any confidential data to be shared with anyone. So you may decide what you want to share and what you do not want to share. So I'll start with my first question, wherein I'm requesting all of you to introduce yourself and also answer a particular question that I'm going to ask, which is what has changed when it comes to talent management between pre and post pandemic? Has something changed? If it has changed, what has changed? If nothing has changed, things are pretty much same as in the past. Anything that you want to share when it comes to the talent management approach that you see in your current or in general that you see in the industry based on your interaction with your peers. To start in a sequence, we should start with Kavita, with you.
Hi, Krishna. Hello, everyone. So I think technology has become the new normal. And something that we have really seen is this entire concept of remote, right? So what does remote mean? Is it where you distance yourself from the employee, or are you remote means you're working from a different location? So something that we have looked at very, very closely from a talent management perspective is to look at digital ways to build personal connections and strengthen the working relationship. So while the upskilling piece has always been there, whether it's been in the online format, a blended format, or in a classroom format, but the focus has now been to how do leaders connect with their teams, how do they bring them together and start working in this completely new normal that we are all dealing with.
So thanks, Kavita. What I'm hearing is that you're saying that technology is more important than what it was earlier. So we'll move on to the next our panelists on the show today. So Dr. Swati, from your perspective, what has changed between pre and post pandemic when it comes to talent management?
Yeah, as I was thinking of this particular question, three words, sort of really come out very prominent in the talent space. I put it in the framework of a 3V. So we are witnessing a lot of variety when it comes to what we are going to do for talent and what's being done. So that's one. Second is velocity. I mean, if you look at it, and you just started by saying, we see a surge of kind of interventions on the rise, maybe using technology, maybe trying to up the human connect. So the velocity has tremendously increased. And thirdly, I think all of it is extremely vibrant. And when I say vibrant, what comes to my mind is the connections that we are trying to build to keep people afloat together and collaborative during these difficult times and the new normal. Technology definitely has been a great lever in trying to help and enable learning. And when we say learning today, the whole gamut of learning, as I said, the variety, velocity, vibrancy has increased in the talent and learning space. We are doing so much more and so many things so differently. So it's not more of the same thing, but different things. And why are we doing all these things is a very fundamental question that we need to address. That is because the talent demands have also changed. The way we are trying to make talent relevant has also changed. So it calls for a lot of reflection on the side of organizations and L&D professionals as us to see how we can make talent more engaged, how can we make them more contribute, and how can we make them more lifelong learners so that they can keep going, new normal, greater normals that come along and guide all this through.
So thanks, Dr. Swati. So I'll next move to Vidya. What have you seen the changes in pre and post pandemic?
Yeah. So I would say there are a couple that I would like to highlight. One is purely, the mental health of the employees. And I think this has become one whole basket of offerings, or, how do we kind of get employees to stay more connected, and mental, physical health is how can we help them to, manage that. That's been one shift that has happened clearly. The second one that we've seen is building the connect. So while the offerings were always there, and the digital skills were already on a uphill, I think the softer skills have taken a lead at this point in time on just simply how can you extend your empathy, or how can you simply listen, understand, be with people, manage virtual teams. I think these are some of the shifts that we've observed post the pandemic. Yeah,
I think that's all our great point. In fact, that was my next question, so I'll come back to that again, specifically asking about the skills that has become more important. I'll first finish this round of question and get more perspective. So I'll next move to Raman. That from your perspective, what has changed? And the good thing is that we have pretty good mix of leaders joining this panel. We have people from IT, we have people from engineering, so good to get, and even from pharma. So if we are hearing something similar across the board, that means there's something that we can take it for granted as the prominent voice when it comes to post-pandemic, pre-pandemic scenario. So Raman, will move on to you.
Yeah. So I think, see, if you look at short term, there are three changes that I see. And when I talk about ABB, which I lead here in India, and when I talk to other colleagues of mine working across the cross sections. So first is obviously, like Kavita talked about, the use of digital technology. And digital technology for everything. So for example, if you're working, you can deliver from anywhere. So, using technology for that. Using technology to deliver learning in the new context. So maybe the L&D programs have not changed; they pretty much remain the same. But instead of doing it in a classroom setting, or sometimes for global programs, you would send people abroad for some of those really high-profile programs, or a lot of those what you call engagement programs used to happen. So I think all of it is now being used with the help of technology. And I think people are slowly finding value in it, which was not the case earlier. And I think pandemic has forced people to change their approach to this and also accept it. And I think that is a change which will stay even once the pandemic goes away. I think it's a permanent change that will happen. And hence the percentage of digital learning that I think most organizations are going to deliver to ensure their talent development will continue to be on the higher side. And I think this is a change whose time has come. So that is one change I think that has happened. The second change, again, I think it has started showing its proud is, especially for multinationals which had talent across the board. So, for example, if I'm a multinational headquartered in US, I have people from India, China working, and it's very, very expensive resources because you have X salary, but when you move as expat, it becomes 3X, and then visa arrangement and etc. etc. And a lot of these people actually get into corporate roles, typically which are senior roles, and hence that budget was really high for the organizations. I think the present pandemic is, and most of these roles people are working from home. So if you are an Indian working in US at a very high expat salary, but you're working from home, so why do I even need you in US? Or for example, why do I need you in Zurich or Germany in that matter? So if all I need is virtual presence and that is working for me well. So I think those are the thoughts that companies are started having. And I think immediate impact will be on the corporate headquarters for most of the large multinationals, wherein they will dramatically cut down on the resources there, or dramatically cut down on the physical infrastructure, and maybe be more comfortable with good talent. If you're an Indian, you're a Chinese, maybe you're maybe from any other country, you work from your own country and continue to deliver. So I think that is one change that will happen. And I think it will have far-reaching impact in terms of how talent looks at its own growth and development, because, you know, sometimes association of going closer to the headquarters means a bit of a growth. So which may change in the new context. And, you know, short-term impact will be just relocation, but, you know, the long-term impact of how do these people keep themselves visible to the larger leadership team, and so on and so forth. So I think that is second change that will happen. And I think third, we also discussed in another forum that access of real talent to the top leadership, I think is it increased dramatically. So earlier what used to happen, you have hierarchy in the organization. So you have CEO, you have N-1, N-2, N-3. Maybe the work is getting delivered by somebody far lower in the hierarchy. And then you are delivering it to the manager, who brings it up to the next level and so forth. But in the present context, I think those maybe layers are going down, because things have to move in a digital framework. So if, let's say, the presentation is happening, maybe the junior guy is presenting directly to the leadership team. So I think some of the smart guys will get far better opportunities to be able to present themselves, be visible, and get their ideas through. So I think that will bring another shift in the way maybe HR or organization look at talent, that, you know, real talent possibly will get far better exposure, and hence far better development and far better growth opportunities. And hence, you know, how we look at talent in terms of, okay, he has to be 3 years in that role, 5 in the role. Maybe those things may change in the long term, not in the short term. I think in the short term, that question will start creeping in the mind of leaders that, you know, this guy is good, so why don't I look at him for something else? But slowly, I think organization will start preparing for real talent to have the right place, rather than years of experience, etc., etc. So those are the three changes that I see from my lens, Krishna.
So Raman, I think all are great points, and I don't want to move to the next topic unless I ask a follow-up question based on what you spoke. So I think one of the points that you said was that if people are working from home, wherever they are working, why should they be treated differently, right? Someone is doing the same work in US and vis-a-vis someone doing the same work in India. Why should they get two different kind of pay scale if they are doing the same kind of work? So do you see that indirectly means that maybe the countries which are more I will say competitive when it comes to pay, at least they should get a bigger chunk of the work. So do you already see those kind of discussion happening in the industry, wherein that also means that suddenly the amount of work or amount of hiring that happens in India will go manifold, right? Because that's a big realization that the entire org can start working from home. So do you see that increasing? Because if at all it becomes a mind share of leaders like you, that means it's going to be like it's a busy time for India to get prepared for and have enough people to work.
Absolutely. I think it will happen in multiple ways. So one is, as I said, you hired an India talent, but you need to get him exported to US, pay all the extra cost, and then make him work and be profitable. Now I can hire in India and get delivered in India itself. So that itself will increase the attraction of Indian talent. Right. So let's say I have two cases. I have a local guy in US or Europe or, you know, any other expensive country. And I was deciding, okay, this guy is X, this Indian guy is maybe X by 2. But by the time I get him from India, it's already 0.9X or 0.8X. That comparison will become really, really very, very effective. It's X versus X by 2. So organizations will start looking at more and more low cost, high caliber people to be hired in the organization. So that is one. At some level, I think already the global companies continue to hire from India. The second thing is, because this talent will have access to global leaders also now, I think they'll be more comfortable with even, you know, let's say you wanted to start a shared service center, or maybe those are things which are already settled in India. And I think the world at large is comfortable with India being the place. But I think, you know, even high skill or upskill jobs. So R&D center, technology centers, research hubs, again, they were there in India, but I think you will see a far higher number of those centers being set in India now. Because the global world will be comfortable that, you know, finally, whether I get them in Germany, but 70% or 50% are Indian or Chinese origin people. So I might as well set up those centers in India. So I think at that level also, you will see far more hiring for those high-end jobs, which people will expect to be done from India per se.
No, I think great point, Raman. I think looks like that this pandemic might work out to be a boon for India, right? If this becomes a prominent way of thinking by across the board. Another news that I recently saw and noticed is that the rentals in San Francisco are all-time low. People are not preferring renting and staying in San Francisco, or maybe even New York City. They are taking bigger homes on outskirts. And then there was an article that going forward, the cities also needs to be competitive. Just because some cities had more companies headquartered, there are more demand supply thing. And now that this working from home has got proven at a scale, cities has to demand why people should come and stay there if they're not getting a better life compared to the cities that they belong to. So that's really a great point. So I'll now move next to Thiru. So Thiru, I think when it comes to Infosys, it's always been known as a company that has created a large training infrastructure. I think a lot of people still talk about that. If you start your career in Infosys and go through their induction program, it's so structured, it's so well done that it always stays with you for life. And I can tell you that I'm also an example of that particular path, because I did complete the training. That was the company that I started my career with. And there is a big infrastructure also being set up now that everything has gone online. And how do you see the future? Like, do you see a future wherein what is already happening online and it is working, is it going to continue? Will it come back to the old way once things are back to normal? How do you see the world going forward when it comes to post this pandemic is over? While answering this question from your perspective on what has changed pre and post pandemic.
Yeah, I think the advantage, Krishna, while speaking last is I can always say all the good points are covered, right? So that is one good thing. If I have to just add on incrementally, what I think has changed, the mindsets have changed. The myths have been busted, right? So if you look at what was pre-COVID, post-COVID, what was needed to learn, what was the need for reskilling, upskilling, what was there before is exactly the same right now. I think just that the paranoia is set up in the minds of both the employees as well as the leaders, saying that both of them have to invest together. Previously, maybe at some point, leadership was focused on investing on upskilling. Employees were focused, but leaders may not be. But now I think that convergence has happened. That's the one good important change that has happened. The second thing is the acceleration has happened in such a way that whatever was needed, I think soft skills were needed even before, the technology was needed even before. But now I think the acceleration in getting everyone to be ready for the next job, because jobs keep changing, not too drastically, but incrementally they keep changing every 3 months, 4 months. So the need for upskilling is even more relevant, and acceleration has happened. And the myths, when I said they have been busted, I think already Raman talked about it. Previously, when we used to do 2.5, 3 years back, you remember we had multiple conversations. When we started to move towards digital learning, a lot of people were saying, why should we do it? I would rather do that in-person kind of a thing. But now everyone is realizing that virtual learning is not really bad as long as you kind of make it experiential and immersive, right? So that way, I think the myths have been busted. From Infosys perspective, the good thing is last 3 years under our chairman guidance and both the CEO and COO, we have been investing heavily in digital infrastructure, digital platforms. And the idea of that is not to just think about it as black or white, right? It is more about seamlessness between what you do when you are in a physical location or a physical setup to what do you do when you are in a virtual setup. So can you seamlessly move between these two? I think that is what is something that we are working on. I strongly still believe that there will be a very important role for physical infrastructure, physical setup, but what you do in that will completely change, because a lot of that, if you remember the flipped classroom models, which has always been talked about, that will actually take a lot more prominence in the in-person thing whenever it comes back to that. Virtual and digital will be used for self-reading, understanding, and everything. And then actual practical insights, practical applications will happen when you return back to work post-COVID. But the good balance will be now maintained, where everyone is clear that you have the best of both worlds right now. I think that is what, according to me, is going to happen.
Thanks for the very good points. So I think the last person to speak is Amit. So I think Amit, I'll also let you speak a little bit about people who are not necessarily knowledge workers. I'm assuming that Volvo has employees who who not necessarily work in front of systems. There are people working on the shop floors. So maybe covering those covering them also will be very helpful for our understanding.
I'll cover both these aspects. So apart from all of my other panelists have talked about, I'll actually add two more aspects towards this talent shift, and then I'll come to specifically on the people who have to come to the workplace to do their work. So one of the two key shifts which I would say is, number one, from a talent perspective, is on the leadership itself. What kind of leadership will be required for the future? And what we have seen, organizations which follow an adaptive leadership model, those organizations have been more successful. So just to quickly explain, an adaptive leadership essentially means that as a leader, I may not have all the answers, but I'm willing to work under somebody else who knows the answers to the questions. Because general hierarchical model of our leadership is that always look up to the boss and say, hey, this is what the problem is, you tell us what to do. And this was an extremely unprecedented situation for everyone. Nobody had a clue about what's to be done. So at that point of time, how do you give leadership control to somebody else who understands it better, and take a back seat and let the right person lead it, and not just by the person who's on top in the hierarchy? I think those are the ones, other leadership styles for the future, which will really work in such unprecedented times. The second critical piece which I have seen is that teams which have seen higher amount of engagement during this entire period of the last 4 to 5 months has been teams where where the leaders have really been more people-centric. And we always talk about it, that HR, it's not HR who owns people, it's the people manager who owns people. It's their job to provide the leadership. But mostly, when it comes to people, it gets delegated to HR. We saw that over here very clearly, that in such situations, those leaders and those managers who were able to connect and own up the people, connect with them on a virtual basis probably, but on a more intense basis, understood what their concerns were, took care of their insecurities, took care of their concerns. Those were the teams which were much more successful. So that will be the recipe for the leadership going forward than the traditional leadership models which we always used to follow earlier. About the shift you talked about, the people who are not knowledge workers or people who don't have systems. See, essentially it essentially means blue collar people, because today most of the white collar people, they really work on that. At that level, again, I won't say there's a talent shift, but I do see a mindset shift. Certainly, there is a mindset that, from a relationship which generally used to be more adversarial in union management relationships in a factory, and is all about how to extract maximum from each other. Union will try to extract maximum from the management, and management vice versa. We saw a period where they were like really working together hand in hand and moving in. That has been a major shift which has happened, that because everybody was looking at survival. Everybody was looking at, hey, if the company survives, then only we'll survive. So that feeling, which we normally talk about it in all our discussions, in all our meetings, we saw it actually happening because the threat was very real. So that is, again, now it's about these organizations now, that how do we really maintain this going forward? See, what happens is when there is a common enemy and, everybody just comes together. The moment that enemy is gone, everybody again goes back to their silos and again goes back to their own previous ways of working. That's an interesting, shift which will happen, and organizations which will be successful going forward, where they're able to make a permanent change towards this and not just looking at it from a point of view of a temporary shift just because of pandemic.
No, I think a great point. And I wanted to cover specifically those workers, because many times when we do these discussions, we ignore a large part of the audience, which is pretty much the backbone of our economy. Now, moving on to the next question, some of you already covered this point, and I wanted to ask specifically to talk about that topic on skills. Like, has suddenly some skills become important? I'll tell you my experience. Is that when it became evident that work from home is the new norm, I think there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of apprehension. And one of the messaging that we told, and we are not a large company, about 1,000 people, one of the messaging that we gave was that now you are in charge. Nobody's there to monitor you. Nobody's there to ask you questions, right? What you do at your home is completely up to you. So you need to take a charge. And we saw a very good response to that message. But what it led to was another problem. The problem that we noticed was that now that work has taken space in your home, you don't know how to differentiate between your home life and your work life. So we had to organize some trainings talking about how to differentiate what is a work time, what is a office time, and be conscious about it, that you need to maintain a balance, because if you work 24 hours and always in front of a computer, it's not sustainable. So I want to hear from your experience that when you moved suddenly, and none of us were prepared for 100% work from home. Now that it moved in, what challenges that you saw, and was there a need to do some skills training so that people are more effective? Like anything that you want to share? Again, start with Kavita. If you had to do some kind of intervention, some kind of skills training for people to be effective while adopting to this new norm of working.
Absolutely, Krishna. I think things that came to the fore, and taking from what Amit had also said, we looked a lot at what was the emotional maturity of all of the people managers, and how is it that we can really help them sense the context, which would become then that becomes a very critical skill, right? So we launched something called DigiB, which was digital ways to build these personal connections and strengthen working relationships. We also have a set of high performance coaches. It's a program that we used to run earlier, but we just extended it now, where we almost created one-on-one conversations, right? So people across the organization could reach across to these coaches to just talk to them and have a conversation more about how does my career work in this new digital context? How is it that I can do feedback conversations better? How do I look at team motivation better? So we broke it up into 3 or 4 pieces. So we said you could have a career conversation on how to give and receive feedback. You could have career conversations on what is the skills that you can do in this new context. How is it that, what are some of the trending skills, and where is the direction that you want to take? So you could have a career conversation with that person. And you also had your EAP program in place, which looked at the mindfulness of a person, looked at, if you wanted to just vent, if you just wanted to have issues that were much larger than the professional context that you were in. So as a combination of all of this, we were able to provide a set of skills to our people around mindfulness, around the ability to just take care of yourself. Because if you do not do that, then it's very difficult to then manage your large teams, which as it is, they are large and now they are scattered and fragmented, and you're working for home and from home at the same time. Besides that, we came up with very, very structured policies around what should be the work timings like, right? When do we have breaks? So we had quiet times during the day, and we took inputs from people and let accounts decide, because, clients are all across the globe. I can't define here saying, hey, go on quiet time between 11 and 12 in the morning. That might be the busiest time for a particular account. So what we told them was just make sure that each account has got quiet time. So you take an hour off for lunch so that, you're able to just spend some time with your family, take care of whatever you need. And then we got feedback saying that, hey, we don't want a tea break or a break in the morning. Give it to us in the evening, because that's when the kids have finished school, online classes. We want to spend some time with them. And we were more than glad to facilitate that conversation. So it's, looking at all of these smaller things that matter and saying, how is it that we can do? Even from a skilling perspective, I think something that we ran, which we saw tremendous success, was this program called 21 Days of Transformation, right? So we said, okay, everyone travels to work. We don't want you to take extra time to learn. We don't want you to eat into your family time or anything else. The amount of time you used to take to travel, so it would generally be 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on where you stayed and which city you were in. We said, give us that time and we will structure learning journeys around that time. So you are spending the same amount of time as you would be traveling, but you would now be upskilling yourself and preparing yourself for higher order roles, for better roles within the organization. And we gave them a plethora of learning journeys. And each of these learning journeys were curated experiential experiences. So people could do it at their own time, their own pace. We gave gentle nudges to people who enrolled, making sure that, they progressed and completed it at regular intervals. But it was a complete curated experience. So these are some of the things that we did to just make sure that people really, just handled this crisis well. And it is a day-to-day thing. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's no point in creating long-term plans. We've tried doing that in the past. It doesn't work. So we're just looking at it at one program at a time. Yeah.
It's a great point, Kavita. So when I move on to this question to you, I'm sure some of it is being done by all the organizations. So it's really great to know. So I'll move next to Dr. Swati. Dr. Swati, since you work in pharma industry, and I'm sure all of us want you to work 24 hours so that you guys can give us vaccine faster than it's supposed to come. So I'm sure there's a lot of work at your end. So how are you guys managing? Because I'm sure there's no dearth of work at your end.
So I wanted to share this very rightly. You pointed out pharma sector. I mean, work has been much more than ever before for us. And so it's a hybrid model for us, okay? Because we did have to have people going to plants, like in Amit's case, where they had to really work. And for us, because, our tagline also says good health can't wait. And we were more than ever before purposeful, aware of the responsibility that we carried as, belonging to the pharma sector, to keep the medicines coming, the health happening, etc., taking it to our customers. So a section of people who were going to work, what is it that we could do for them? And they were very psychologically, physically, emotionally vulnerable also. We have to understand they were braving the corona times and showing up at work. And that's what kept the business continuity was happening because of them. So we ran a whole lot of campaigns also for the people who were in that segment. Okay, and we realized that for them, the learning had to quickly happen in the flow of work. You can't, anyway, physical classrooms was out of question, but they were already grappling with the pressure of, as you rightly said, high pressure, high volumes of work happening. So how could we give them little lighter moments, building on what Kavita was saying, realizing the emotions that they were going through. And for those, the support teams like IT, HR, etc., who did not always go to work, but were primarily working from home, we also dawned on a sense of responsibility of not really being support, but being really, playing that active support, in that sense. So very interestingly, we also ran a holistic campaign around care. And in that care, we ran for care for self, care for others, and care for business. So we enabled people of different segments, those working from home, sites, plants, etc., how they could manage their own emotions, mental balance, well-being, all of that. That was the self part. The others was how they could lead their teams, collaborate, even work with their families better, work-life balance, because we realized that a lot of that was also changing for them. And the care for business. For example, how do you come out with new innovations? Because for us, the pressure was there, like, for example, recently we launched a drug Avigyan, which is more for care of COVID patients. So the portfolio churn was happening. Our businesses, which spans across geographies, whether it is North America, Europe, India, and emerging markets, and the like, and everywhere we were witnessing a lot of varieties, because people and the countries were going down to lockdown at various points in time. So there was a no one size fits all. We worked around policies which made sure that our people were secure to the extent that they could be. Not only the people, but even their families were taken care of, like, additional insurance coverage, and making sure that the work-life balance, what we could do for the kids who were at home and the moms who were taking care. So a lot of that also around policies, plus ensuring that we could sustain the learning and the work appetite. I think that sustenance part is really key, because what happens is when you're going through a real job, at that point in time, you get the energy to deal with it. But we realize that this is going to be for a longer time. So that's why, remember the outset, I said a lot of variety, velocity. We realize that we have to keep doing things differently to keep at it. And no point in planning something which is very long term, but coming at something which will meet their evolving needs.
That's a great point. Now that in the interest of time, I'll not go put all the questions to everyone. So what I hear between Kavita and Dr. Swati is that companies have realized that this is a new normal wherein you're working from home. You need to realize the home space, workspace, a lot of policies, a lot of interventions were planned so that people could deal with that. And we are still not through with the time, right? We're still going through that time. So if any one of you want to add on something that you have done that's really working out pretty well that you'd like to share, I think you can just maybe go ahead and
I can quickly share one point. And we realized that during these times, especially when people were working from home, the socialization is not happening. And somebody said about the mental health issues. There were emotional health issues, mental health issues, social health issues which came up. And the people, and also the fact that people were extremely insecure because they were hearing all the bad news everywhere. Apart from the COVID news, there was also about job cuts. There were also about increments cut and pay freezes. That's what the industry was all about. That's what the newspapers were all full of. So what we said was that every meeting has to start with a check-in process. So we made it mandatory for all our managers, and we actually sensitized them how to conduct a check-in process. It was about two questions: that how are you feeling as of now, and is there something preventing you from being fully present in the meeting? Every meeting started with that, and we actually realized that sometimes we had blocked 1 hour for a meeting, and check-in went on almost about 35-40 minutes. People were so full, they were wanting to speak to someone, they just wanted to share what they are feeling, and we just rescheduled the meetings for the agenda later, but we just kept it on so that we are hearing it out. I think that was an important piece where we are which really helped us in maintaining a good mental health of our employees during these times.
I think great point. So I think based on what you said, that was my next question that I wanted to ask. So I'll build on that. So in the current time, I think we heard more negative news than positive news, right? In fact, one of the prominent discussion in most of the family WhatsApp group is that 4 mahine aur bache hain. We don't know what more this year is going to show, right? So there's a lot of apprehensions about what more we'll see this year. So, but when I look at some of the data, like I'm telling you my data at some Simply Learn platform, the number of users who are enrolling and the amount of time that they're spending on the platform is all-time high, right? Literally, it has become 3x of what our users was in January compared to what our users is in July. So I'm trying to understand what is the reason for that. At one end, I think the salary hikes are all-time low, or there is no hike at all. There is a fear of job loss, and it is for real. I'm sure knowledge workers are relatively less impacted, but we do see some impact, and we still see discussion about job cuts happening across the board in many large companies. So what is driving employees to go and spend money from their own pocket on third-party platform like ours, and at the same time spend more time learning online, because you're already spending a lot of time online by doing your work, which has completely gone online? Is it because, so one of my hypotheses that I have is that during this current challenging time also, a lot of employees could see that people who are skilled in areas where there's a lot of demand supply gap, or what we call it next generation skill or digital skills, in the current time also they are being treated differently in companies. So our companies, while they're not giving a hike across the board, they're still treating their high performers and high-end skill people differently than the people who are having normal skills. Are something like this happening? I'm not sure, so I just wanted to understand. So anyone of you want to go, maybe Amit, if you want to have some perspective you want to share.
No, I'll say two things which are happening in this. One is, as I said, the insecurity which is there, and primarily that insecurity is not coming more from organizational vibes. They're coming more from the industry vibes, or the newspapers, or all the news, the WhatsApp universities or the WhatsApp newspapers, which keeps on sharing things. And media also spices up things, and also hypes sometimes one element somewhere. That's one side of it. The second piece, which is more inside the organization, is also happening, that organizations are also relooking at their business models, and they're looking at probably a more leaner business models going forward to deal with such unprecedented situation that something happens there. What people are also thinking, that in case the business model changes, would I have skills which are fungible? Will I still be relevant, or will I be straddled with only one skill, which in a changed business model may get even outsourced? Maybe tomorrow I sign up with a partner. We say, hey, this particular task is to be done by my partner, and not by the core employees of the company. So those models may change. So sometimes what happens is that people are also equally mindful of this shift which is happening in the industry, and trying to upskill themselves so that they remain relevant, skill themselves, so that they remain on top of it when it comes to their competencies required for the organization.
Yeah.
Raman, I'll move on to you. Do you see this? Sorry, I'll come back to you. I think you want to add something, so I'll come back to you. Yeah. So, Raman, do you see this that people see that if you are in areas where there's a lot of demand-supply gap, they see differential treatment, and hence there is a desire that I want to be in that lot, I don't want to be in the current lot?
I'll just take a step back, and typically not just this pandemic, I think difficult situation actually further differentiates between low, average and good talent. And I think that's the same thing that is happening in this context also. So if you have a limited budget, then obviously you will put those budget only for your high performers or people with the right skill sets. If you have to cut jobs, and I think most of us had to go through that experience of, who will need to let go, where do we cut? So all those cuts effectively happens to the low performers, people who are not really critical, and people see that. And I think that definitely puts that fear of God in the mind of those people, that yes, we need to kind of take that ownership of our development and also be in the right side of technology learning. I think that is definitely which drives those behavior. I think another counterintuitive thought is, while working from home, and yes, many times people are working harder also, but yes, many times, you have enough flexibility within the work hours. So, you have those downtime. Typically, when you were in office, when you had this downtime, you maybe go ahead and talk to a colleague, maybe you go ahead and, have a coffee break, etc. But maybe now if the time is available, people are possibly using that time for self-learning. And I think people might also be seeing that a lot of learning focus has shifted from classroom learning to digital learning. So they are also experimenting with this. Okay, while organization is providing me those options, and many of the time organization is providing those free options of, even technical learning. So maybe that also, once you are used to that learning, then you say, okay, organization gave me these XYZ, but there were other solutions available. So let me go and explore that also. So sometimes that effect also, I think, comes in play, and people possibly come to those platforms and go for the self-learning.
No, I think great point, Raman. I think maybe becoming, so you're saying that it's more like becoming a habit and availability of time which is driving this. Great point. Now coming to you, Thiru. So I think when we were connected yesterday on preparing for this event, one point that you had mentioned was that it's not the skill that is important. It's like your ability to learn those skills, because the skill life is very limited. Like it's a short. In 2 years, the skill itself becomes outdated. Something new comes in. So when you start looking at, say, performance management of employees, and when you have to decide who to give raise, who not to give raise, how do you decide? Because when you say that, okay, let's say AI machine learning is hot topic today, but maybe 3 years down the line, we don't know what new technology will come in. So how do you decide? Like, how do you take a call?
I think informally, when we spoke before, I talked about it. At Infosys, what we are doing is we kind of segmented the skills into 3 buckets. And this we have done it even 3 years back, right? Where we said at any given point of time, we need to start calibrating the skills into different segments. What we call them as Horizon 1, 2, and 3. So Horizon 1 basically is what, in a simplistic language, it's nothing but skills of past, which means they are there today, they are being used because a lot of legacy processes are there using those technologies or those skills, but you will not see a good momentum for growth there, right? So a lot of employees will be in that segment. Then Horizon 2 is what are the current skills and what is the shelf life of that for 3-4 years, which will give you that growth momentum for the company. And then Horizon 3 is where you know what are the skills that are futuristic, but which will become mainstream. So every 6 months we recalibrate this, right? So what we do then is we basically tell the employees that, you are in Horizon 1, industry is moving to Horizon 2 or 3. So until unless you kind of create yourselves ready and become relevant in those 2 and 3 technologies or skills, you will not necessarily grow as fast, because opportunities of growth will be on Horizon 2, 3. So that is the learning part, that is the nudges, that is the recommendations we have given to our employees. So to your point, what we discussed yesterday, AI ML, for example, everyone talked about it being the next best growth for the employees, but you're already seeing that AI ML may not be so much, because all the hyperscalers are already kind of codifying that. They are giving you out of box algorithms and everything. All you need to do is data and data modelings and around, right? So how do you understand that? How do you calibrate that? How do you tell that to your employees is key. Coming back to the performance management question, I think that again has not changed. Again, as we kept talking about, what was there before is exactly the same. You always give meritocracy the most important increments, the best possible opportunities and everything. But now I think the employees, I think Raman was talking about, the visibility of people has actually increased quite a bit because of the digital platforms, the digital telemetry. I think in the initial part of the conversation, Krishna, I remember someone saying that there may not be people maybe not knowing what, managers may not be knowing what people are doing. Actually, it is the other way, right? Because of data, you know a lot more than what the employee was doing in the campus or in a physical setup to what they are doing in terms of how they are working and everything. So my perspective on that is performance management has always been meritocracy oriented, but to your point, absolutely, companies, if they have to be relevant and grow, they will always give priority to the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 skills. So in that context, employees, anyone who kind of moves from Horizon 1 to 2 or 3 will get that much more better opportunities or better pay scale. And we have introduced what we call a skill-based incentive. right? Which means as of Horizon 2 or 3, you get an additional percentage increment or additional percentage salary hike. So that actually keeps the employees also wanting to be in that. Not that we are cutting down the salaries of people who are in Horizon 1, because Horizon 1 also gives you major portion of your revenue, but they also need to understand that they need to move, because as Amit was saying, every company is now relooking at business model. Everyone is looking at cutting down costs. So if you have to do it, the only way to do it is the new technologies that will help you to simplify things. So that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks, Thiru, great point. So moving on to Dr. Swati, I think Swati, you had a point related to this.
Yeah, I was just trying to say that the question that you asked, why there has been a surge, we really need to think,
Yep.
because of the learning that people are taking to. See, many times whenever a lot of things are beyond our control, we try to control what we can control. No? And that's typically happening. When we sort of went through this, we also saw that there was huge appetite for learning in our learning platform. People are wanting to sign up for courses, do courses much more than ever before. So it was really, we also kept wondering that how is it that there is work and they're still wanting to learn, And I agree with Raman that sometimes they find those pockets of time. So a lot of people like Kavita, you also mentioned, they came back and told us that because we were traveling to work, now we are not doing, and therefore. So in light of all this, we introduced a very nice way of upskilling our people. What we did is we that's a concept that we said is we'll make you digital ninjas during this time, because it's a good time to focus on upskilling. So we said, whatever work you're doing, bolt it on with the 3Ds: data, digital, and design. We were anyway trying to, accelerate our digital transformation journey, but what better time than doing it right now? And we identified courses that we wanted people to learn from MOOCs also, and curated certain things, and we wanted them to go and enroll. And I can tell you, so much of traction that we received across geographies, different parts, and everybody, huge appetite, and across levels also. So we had the millennials going there, we had the senior management, really people who are in their 50s also signing up. So that's why we are saying that learning is something which people realize is currency. It is a gateway to hone their skills. They want to take accountability of their learning, be on the driver's seat, and be employable. Maybe it's because they want to be employable, maybe they want to be relevant, show that they have performance and potential, and the time is now. That's what's happening.
So, Dr. Satya, I think great point, and also I must say that you have very good marketing understanding, because you are marketing your all the L&D programs really very well. Maybe that's another thing that you can look at it.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to my next question and start with Vidya. Is that, see, one thing that we had seen before this pandemic, that hiring from campus was a big part of the talent augmentation that all of us used to do, right? Every company had a large university program wherein we used to hire from universities, get them a very good in-person experience, train them, get them up to the speed, train them on both the hard skill, soft skill, and then assign them to different projects depending upon the needs that different projects at that point of time. Now I'm assuming that hiring has not stopped. We continue to hire, but everything has moved virtual. So two-part question that I had. One was that how has your experience been doing something that was happening primarily in a physical setup to now 100% online? So what has been the experience in terms of effectiveness so far, if you're already going through the program? And once this pandemic is over and we are back to the old normal, how do you see, are you going to do a mix of online, offline? How do you see the world going forward when it comes to specifically the new hire training, what we call the new hire onboarding?
Yeah. So we did have a challenge for some time, and we were frozen for a bit to say how do we kind of onboard so many people, because our batches are close to 300 odd every month, and that's a huge number that we onboard. So we did have to stall our batch for that month when the pandemic happened, and after some time we kind of postponed the batch, because we thought we'll return back to work, and it's about 15 days or 1 month, but that never happened. And then finally we actually had to get on to the online model. Fortunately, I think the online module turned out to be far better, in the sense that, especially the softer skills which we used to do in smaller batches, actually we could address people in larger batches. And we broke down all the modules into small capsules. So if we were doing a 3-day kind of a module, we broke them down into 2-hour capsules. We changed the whole methodology to ensure that we could engage people over 4 to 6 hours a day rather than doing 8 hours a day, because those breaks were not going to happen. So there was a huge shift that happened in the way we were conducting the whole end-to-end modules for this set of people. Our batch last month, actually, our first online batch passed out. And what we saw was that the experience that people had, and even the allotment that was done, and the intake that happened even from a business perspective, was far more positive. Yeah, and
so do you see this going forward in the future?
Sorry?
So what do you think will happen the year after, assuming that Corona is
yeah, so now the question is, I think a blended model is what might come back after we are back, because we did see some of the benefit of also doing certain things, in an online way. Fortunately or unfortunately, there was also some infrastructure work that was going on one of our sites, and we had to relook at, do we really need to build an infrastructure of this kind? And there were changes that were made to that as well. So yes, a lot has changed, and I think we will get back to a blended model is my first level, reaction or thought to this question of yours. But currently there are 4 batches running, and they're running extremely successfully at this point in time. And certain things we've also noticed that, there's a lot more seriousness, or rather people are taking charge of careers. To your earlier question, the surge is happening because there's a lot of competitiveness also that has built. The questions are saying, hey, what are you learning today? I went through this program and I learned a lot, and this was a new skill that I picked. What are you doing? So there's a lot of peer pressure also that has now suddenly started to happen, and people have started to kind of really value the fact that learning is playing a huge role, and being relevant is going to be extremely important. So I think the blended model is the first reaction, but to be truly bold, and courageous, I think we can, if we really have, depending on how organizations actually move into, coming back to a normal or the new normal, I think those decisions will show up, when we actually get back, and how that's going to look is something. So there are many thoughts actually. There are also thoughts now to say that let's do all of this online and then get them to work. That's also one thought that we've been, pondering over, to say why have them over? We rather give them one day at the campus, things like that. So I think that is still evolving at our end, and I'm hoping we bring out something that's best for our employees.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So again, in the interest of time, I'll not ask this question from everyone. Anybody wants to share another perspective on how do you see onboarding changing after this Corona is over? Do you see one safe way of looking at it is that it will be blended. It will be some part online, some part offline. Now we know what works in online. We have always done offline, so we pretty much know what worked in offline. But any other thoughts about what will change when it comes to onboarding?
Krishna, it's interesting that the moment we started doing the virtual onboarding, the interaction between the classmates in a particular batch became very, very high, because they're very comfortable with this entire online format. They're very comfortable with, doing the WhatsApp chats and doing things in capsule modules. They would rather do that and then do the, so they like doing the learning bit in the online format, but they prefer doing the catch-ups with their buddies and their managers in person. So, that distinction has come out very, very clearly. They actually came back to us saying, and when we ran, focus group discussions to check on how was this being taken up by the kids who are going through the program right now versus kids who have gone through it just before Corona and, the last quarter of last year, they were able to relate saying, hey, we actually get more time to upskill ourselves. So what they're doing is they're using that extra time that they're getting during the induction to build those niche skills. So when they actually present themselves to be picked up by accounts, they actually have better skills than in addition to what they have. So that peer pressure, of course, works, but then the good ones are really learning more and creating that entire ecosystem for themselves. So they run hackathons amongst themselves at UST, and then they come back and say, hey, we are a group of 10, we have done this, and we've seen them being picked up directly by CXOs and working. So they're seeing the value in putting that effort in and looking at not just looking at company managed learning, but what is the self-managed learning that they can look at, and how can they build those skills for themselves so that they can project themselves better once they actually complete the program and are ready to be deployed.
So I'll move to Thiru to answer this question in particular, because you're doing it at a much larger scale, like thousands and thousands of people getting trained simultaneously all across India. And I think in the beginning, there's a lot of news also, where you sent your new recruits back to their respective homes. So how has been the experience? Because before the pandemic also, it was done at a much larger scale.
I think the biggest issue...
And especially also at this point that when it comes to IT companies, I think there's a lot of pressure on margin, right? Little improvement in margin has a big impact on the stock price, right? And of course, not running the office has definitely impacts your EBITDA in a positive manner.
No, I think good thing is we own our campuses, right? So not running doesn't really have too much of bearing on the cost. But coming back to the the trainees and what their experience, I think is the biggest area of improvement that needs to happen, especially in India, is the infrastructure, the network, the entire connectivity. I think that's the biggest challenge, right? Even though we invested heavily in the digital platforms and everything, we were able to send the 9,000 trainees out. The problem was 20% of them didn't own a laptop before. And even if they wanted a laptop, the problem was the lockdown was there. And if the lockdown was there, they could not even go and buy it, right? And then even if they had it, they didn't have UPS. If they had UPS, the actual network whether it's Airtel or any other telecom providers, the network was not stable. And even now, if you look at it, network is not stable, right? So these are the issues that we face. But the good thing is people definitely like this. I think there was a worry. I think that insecurity was always there. Oh, will the company, not just Infosys, right? Everyone was talking about maybe there will not be job commitments that will be honored and all of that. So people also started to kind of get on to the learning. Maybe when they come into a campus like Mysore, they also have other distractions. Right now they are at home, and you talked about the time. So the time actually is spent on learning or networking with the other friends, saying how they are learning. So we have fantastic learning, and that is where what we did was we realized that if you want to make the digital learning effective, we also realized that we may have to have a better collaboration platform, better digital classroom. So we created our own digital classroom infrastructure, just like we created our own digital learning platform, where we said, if you want to do a digital classroom effectively, how do you make it immersive? How do you make it fun? How do you make it interactive? How do you know who is focusing, who is not focusing? Is it like right now I'm on video, you know what I'm doing. If I just switch off my video, you don't know whether I'm listening to you or not, right? So how do you make sure that you kind of tap onto those observations and do it in a way that your privacy is not really taken for granted? So those are the things that we focused on, and we developed our own digital classroom infrastructure with our digital learning platform. And then we are now making sure that everyone is engaged, everyone is participating, everyone has actually learned a bit, they are testing it. So those kind of things happen, but still a lot more effort has to go, I think, in the overall infrastructure and the communication connectivity in the country. I think that's the biggest challenge even now. The good thing after the lockdown most of the people got their laptops. Most of we have given, just like every other company, a lot of loans as well as incentives. We have distributed UPSs. So a lot of those things we have done to kind of ensure people get used to the new normal.
I think, through a great point, we are hoping that all this infrastructure issue will be taken care by Reliance and Mukesh Ambani, now that he has all the large tech companies part of Reliance. So hopefully next couple of years, you don't have to worry about that. Now I'll move to the last point. And last point is just, I'd like all of you to just answer in one line. And the question is that if, as an HR leader, if you have to give suggestion to someone who is joining the industry for the first time on staying relevant? What will be your online suggestion on staying relevant? So I'll start with Amit.
I think to stay relevant, one of the things which you need is learning agility. I think that's the key piece. People who will be successful going forward will be the ones who have that agility and will keep on, adding competencies and learning new things, and not just saddled with just one thing which they've learned and then just stay on that laurels. So that to me is going to be
Saying
the
that as long as you continue to learn, as long as you continue to learn, you have a future.
You will stay relevant and you have a future.
No, a great point, Amit. I move to Dr. Swati.
I think it's about listening and being curious. And when I say listening to what's happening inside and outside.
Yeah, I think, and as Indians, we don't really listen a lot, right? I think we have a habit of responding before listening. So great point. So learning agility, listening. Move to Raman.
So I think learning agility, what Amit said, is the most important, and I'll just break it down from my perspective. So learning agility would mean basically the humility to know that you don't know all, the curiousness that Swati mentioned, that you need to be curious about continuously trying to innovate yourself. And, having that desire that learning is not like you had a degree and hence it's over. It's going to be a lifelong phenomenon. Every 1 or 2 years, you need to continue to insist on trying to take that learning forward. And finally, I think, and this is one important thing, and which we try, I think, as organization leaders, I think all of you will agree, is shift the focus of learning from organization to the employee. So they need to take charge of their learning rather than thinking that, my L&D guy, my manager, my organization will take care of it. I think those are the things if people take care of, they would have a long-term good career.
Yeah, so Raman, great point. And that's why we have companies like us. If you don't take care of your employees, we'll take care of their learning. So moving on to then Kavita. What will be your suggestion?
I think it's a constant reflection, redefining and engineering ourselves. We have to keep looking at it, right? So learning agility is learning, unlearning and relearning new things. So you should be able to unlearn what you have learned and be willing to give that up. You get into that complacency often and a comfort zone, so often you don't want to let go of the knowledge that you have learned. So it is that ability to just let go and be free to just get out of your comfort zone and learn something new. So re-engineer, redefine and reflect all the time.
Yeah. So again, great points. What I'm hearing is that not only learning is important, unlearning what you have learned is also important. Many times that becomes a challenge also. Great point. We'll move to Vidya.
Yeah, I'll just say one word, which is Shoshin, and that's what we use. It's a Zen word, which means a beginner's mindset. So how do you have that? And I think a lot of things that everybody has said, about being curious, about your ability to learn new things, about relearning, listening, I think it encompasses all of that. So the beginner's mindset or Shoshin is what I would say is important. Yeah.
I also completely agree. I think in a startup world, we call that first principle thinking, that when you start with anything, you first try to start as a layman and start questioning right from the base. Don't assume that anyone knows anything and start from that point. I agree completely. That's a very, very important point. Last, we'll move to Thiru.
I think most of it I agree. Outside of that, being open to what are the opportunities, making sure that you can connect the dots and don't only narrowly focus on specialization, but broaden the horizons, right? Meaning, how do you kind of learn not just one skill, but many skills? Look for what exactly is the right one at the right time, and can you kind of move from one skill to another skill? And that's where skilling and learning, unlearning, relearning will come into play. So being more open as well as connecting the dots and being ready to kind of take the plunge on whatever opportunity comes the way.
So Thiru, great point, but since you told be open, I wanted to ask a follow-up question on that. So I remember when I started my career 20 years back and went to a company, whatever work was given, we said, okay, work is work, let's take it up and get started. But these days, when you hire a new young guys and tell them that, okay, you have to do this, the next thing that you hear from them is that, no, I don't want to do this. Like everybody wants to become a data scientist today. Nobody wants to work on a mainframe computer that they don't hear. They hear that, okay, they don't know because there is no news about them, right? So when you, in a large setup, you have to do all kinds of work. It's not that you can be selective. If customers paying for work, you have to support them. How do you take care of a response? When you say your new hires that be open and the new hire says, no, it's good, but I want to do something else. How do you take care of that?
Again, Krishna, you remember the days when you were getting trained, right? Meaning, at that time also there was mainframe and mainframe to Java to open source to AI to all of those are, they're always the new shining object that is there, right? I think as long as you can tell them, are there opportunities that will come your way? And then it's not just that like the old government job where you basically only have one thing to do all your life. Just show them the kind of possibilities. And that's what I was talking about. If you want someone to be open, also show them the horizon, right? If you just say, if I put someone in a in a closed room and say, guys, be open, what does that open means? So as long as you show that how the opportunities will manifest, and then what you take today, how does it help you for long-term vision or even short-term vision that you may have? How do you connect? I think that's the key, because this is the problem which we have been having every year when we train 25,000 trainees. As soon as you put someone in the traditional streams, then immediately they don't want to work on it, right? They call someone else, and then all of them will come and say, can you move from one stream to another stream? But I think as long as you tell them the narrative and say what opportunities were there, it's just about you to kind of catch on and hold on to those. I think that's the key. I think there's no straight answer to that, to be frank, at least in my mind.
Well, thanks, Thiru, for answering that. And I think we are pretty much crossed our time. So thank you everyone for taking time and joining that. And sorry we got a little bit delayed. So I hope that you can make it to a next meeting. Thank you.